Hello friends, it's Jessica from Three Rivers Homestead, and I'm back with another video to show you what we were up to in terms of projects on the homestead this week. If you follow me on Instagram, you know I had a rather interesting week. A pretty traumatic incident happened to me here while I was working with the bees. I started out the week, I ran out of some raw honey, and I like to have raw honey in my tea every morning, so I decided that I would head out and pull a frame of capped honey from my hives. I was filming it for you guys, and there was a hole in the veil of my bee jacket, and I ended up getting attacked by my bees. I was stung more than 40 times and ended up in the hospital. And I wanted to do a video about it for you guys, but I'm not at a place where I can talk about it yet. It was a pretty scary incident, and I'm still healing. So we're just going to talk about other fun things that were happening on the homestead, and I will get back to the bee incident in the future so that you can learn from my mistakes and hopefully not make them. So as usual, we're harvesting lots of food on the homestead and turning it into delicious meals. And so I thought I would share with you some of those more fun things that were happening other than the bee stings that I dealt with. We have a lot of zucchini coming in from the garden, and I've shown you before how I shred it and freeze dry it, but I just want to show you another way we're preserving it is by spiralizing it into zucchini noodles, and we can freeze dry it that way, and then when we want to use them in the future, all we have to do is pull out the freeze-dried noodles, throw them into a pot of boiling water, or throw them into the sauce. It's just a really great way to preserve them, so I thought I'd throw that idea out there for you if you're looking for a way to preserve zucchini. We were also really busy in the garden this week, so I set up my little tent so my little guys could be within, kind of my line of sight while I got busy with the older kids harvesting some goodies here in the garden. So I did two separate plantings of potatoes this year. The first set of potatoes got in the ground in the beginning of April into the raised beds that were already prepared. And then my second planting didn't get into the ground. It's in an in-ground space, and that was more towards the middle of May. So those early potatoes that I had planted in April, the greens were already starting to dry and die back. And so we were excited to get a little bit of a potato harvest. We haven't had potatoes in the house for quite a while. And so I asked for volunteers, and Elizabeth and Gabriel wanted to go pull potatoes with me. Potatoes are one of the most fun items to harvest in the garden. It feels a lot like digging for buried treasure. So we mulch our potato beds, our raised beds, pretty heavily with straw. Since we don't hill the potatoes with dirt, we just put a really heavy straw mulch on top. So our first step in harvesting these potatoes is to pull all of that straw off, and then we could get to the fun of pulling out the plants. And I do find that in the raised beds, it is kind of hard to get to all of the plants. We have a garlic bed that I planted potatoes in last year, and I left potatoes all along the edges. And we ended up with volunteer potato plants in that bed this year. So I was trying to be much more thorough as we were digging these out to really reach along the edges of the bed and make sure that there weren't any potatoes left deep down. These were Yukon Gold potatoes, and I had only put a little under 5 pounds of potatoes into those beds, and we got about 35 pounds out of it. So I was pretty pleased with that. And then we were going through the garden and finding other goodies. As I mentioned, just zucchini growing like crazy. We're also reaching the point of the year where cucumbers are starting to grow. And I do notice that this bed does need fertilized, so that's something we're going to get to later. Some of these beds, just the plants kind of don't look as lush and green as others. So we're going to get some fish emulsion in here and fertilize these. But cucumbers is just so exciting. It's one of my favorite summer veggies. I love to make cucumber salad, and I'll show you my recipe for that when we get back in the kitchen later on in this video. It's that time of year where it's just fun to kind of run around the garden and see what food there is available and fill baskets, and then we can go inside and meal plan based on what we're able to pull out of the garden. And the kids find this pretty fun. So as I mentioned, meal planning looks a lot different this time of year because we don't know in any given day how much of an item we're going to have available coming out of the garden. So in the winter, I will sit down and plan from what I know is on the shelves and make a pretty detailed plan. In the summer, it's kind of going a day-to-day kind of thing where I'll wake up in the morning, we'll go out, we'll assess what we can harvest from the garden, and then I'll make my meal plan for the day based on those items that I have available and that I want to use up. So another item that I'm very excited to finally harvest are green beans. So I did my first accession of green beans in the middle of May, and those were wax beans mostly. The difference between a green bean and a wax bean is the wax beans do not have chlorophyll in them. They are yellow green beans, and so that is what this first succession was. You use them just like you would green beans, and we got a nice little harvest, just our first little harvest from them, and they'll continue to produce throughout the year. We're going to cook those up here later on. I'll show you how we prepare those. We got our first green peppers from the garden. These were yellow monster peppers that we could have kept on the plant to continue to sweeten up, but I decided to pull a couple just because it's been so long since we've had green peppers in the garden or in the kitchen, that I'm excited to use some of those. And then the chard is still producing pretty prolifically, and so we will harvest some of that and use that in the next couple of meals as well. So this is our cute little harvest that my helpers dug up with me, and I think that we can make some fun meals. We're gonna cool off. It was really hot on this day, so I'm gonna give the children a treat for all of their hard work. They had a little bit of sorbet. We're gonna enjoy that in the shade and cool down. And then we're gonna head back to the kitchen, and I'm gonna show you how we're gonna use all of this beautiful fresh produce in some meals over the next couple of days. So just a little harvest. We're at the beginning of the gardening season, and it's fun to start seeing stuff coming into the kitchen. And Lord willing, we'll just continue to increase over the coming weeks. So let's start with those cucumbers. Cucumbers are one of my favorite summer vegetables, as I mentioned. When I was pregnant with Hannah last summer, cucumbers are what I craved. I would make cucumber salad like this pretty much every day. So let me show you how I make it. The first thing I do is I just kind of cut up my cucumbers into little slices, and then I quarter those slices and throw them into a bowl. You could slice them however you would like. It's just a basic cucumber salad. If we had fresh tomatoes coming in from the garden, I would cut some of those and add them. What we have is green pepper though, so I am just kind of dicing up one of those green peppers. We're going to add it. If we had red onion that was ready, we would add a little bit of that. We're just working with what we have. I have some fresh dill that we also harvested while we were outside. We're going to chop that fresh dill up. It smells so amazing. This just smells like summer to me. And we're going to add that delicious, wonderful dill to our bowl. And then we're just going to add some mayonnaise. This is homemade mayonnaise here. You could use any mayonnaise you wanted to. We're going to salt it and pepper it pretty well. If you wanted it spicy, you could add a little bit of garlic powder. You could add some crushed red pepper, whatever you like, but we're just going to add salt and pepper and mix that around. And it's just, I mean, this isn't rocket science, just a basic cucumber salad that we're going to eat for the next couple of meals. All right, now we're going to work on these wax beans. So as I mentioned, wax beans are just like green beans. You're going to cook them and prepare them like green beans. You could can them up with just as you would with any green bean recipe, but we are going to steam ours. Steaming is the way I prefer to prepare my green beans for meals because it is the method that retains the most nutrition in the beans and gets them nice and soft. Next, we're going to work on our potatoes. I pulled all of the teeny tiny potatoes. I told you we had harvested about 35 pounds of this first little harvest. And we're going to wash all of the little itty bitty potatoes, and we're going to make something out of those to go with this meal. So these are what you would consider kind of new potatoes, these little teeny ones. They're so tender and delicious. I just love to gather these up and use them in a meal this way. We are going to slice them and we are going to roast these potatoes in the oven. If I had bacon grease in the fridge, I would add a couple dollops of that to my pan here, but we do not currently have any bacon grease, so we're just going to drizzle it with a little bit of olive oil instead. I do have garlic scapes in the fridge that I'm still trying to use up, so we chopped several of those up pretty finely, and we're going to just sprinkle those over the potatoes and mix them in. As I mentioned, we're going to pour olive oil, added a little bit of water, some salt and pepper, and we're just going to cover that and put it in the oven. Now, I was going to grill out our meat for this meal, but we had a pop-up storm that showed up, so I had to pivot my plans, and we're just going to finish the meal inside. So there are our green beans that are steaming. I decided that I didn't decide at this point. I already had pork chops sitting out to put on the grill, but instead of grilling them, we're just pan searing them in a little oil, and then we'll throw them in the oven on broil to let it finish off. And we're going to have a nice, delicious meal here using all of our homegrown veggies. So this is how it turned out. And as I mentioned, this isn't a meal that I set out to make in the morning. At this point, meal planning happens based on what the children and I harvest from the garden in the beginning of the day. And it's just really fulfilling. The children, I feel like they eat better. They really enjoy the meals when they were part of the work of harvesting it and in many cases preparing it. It's just such a fun thing. All right, as I said, zucchini everywhere. We're drowning in zucchini at this point, and so I have to find creative ways to use it. I've mentioned many times that using them in baked goods is one of my favorite ways, but sometimes we just get bored of having the same old zucchini bread and zucchini muffins. So for this breakfast on this morning, I decided to do something a little different. I'm shredding up my zucchini, and we are going to make zucchini waffles. So I'm using my same basic pancake or waffle recipe that I use all the time. But what you're going to do is you're going to take out a little bit of the wet ingredients. So I take out a little bit of the milk or water that I use in the recipe, and I'm going to replace it with some of this wet zucchini, and it's just going to work out just fine. So here's our bowl of shredded zucchini. We're adding our flour, and I will put my basic pancake and waffle recipe in the video description so you can see it. But on top of the flour here, we are also going to add some baking powder. We're going to add baking soda. We are also going to add a little bit of salt, and we're going to do cinnamon for this particular. I usually don't put that in my regular pancakes, but we will do it for the zucchini pancakes to make it taste more, like a zucchini muffin. And that's all of the dry ingredients. We're going to mix those together. I don't put sugar in my pancake or waffle batter because we're going to end up putting sugar on top of it in the form of maple syrup. Now we're adding our wet ingredients. We're going to add eggs. I have tons of duck eggs to use up, so that is what I am using in this recipe. We're adding our eggs. We added a little bit of olive oil, and then we're adding some water. And as I mentioned, I cut the normal amount of water that I would add to my recipe because that zucchini was already wet and we didn't want the batter to be too wet. If we had some nut milk already prepared, like cashew milk or almond milk, I would have added that. Just a little bit of vanilla extract there, and our batter is all ready to go. And we are just going to make this just as we would a regular pancake and put it in our waffle iron here. Pancakes are a great way to hide some extra nutrition for your children, pancakes or waffles, because once they get those delicious pancakes covered in maple syrup, they will forget or they won't even notice that there are vegetables in it. You can see some little green chunks there, but I find that as long as I drizzle maple syrup on top, my little ones do not protest the idea of vegetables being in their waffle. And zucchini is wonderful because it takes on the flavor of kind of whatever you're serving it with. So it's not like there's a heavy vegetable taste in there. So I have some very happy children ready to have some zucchini waffles for breakfast. I just thought I would share this idea with you. If you are also kind of struggling to find ways to use up your zucchini, why not shred some up and add them to your breakfasts and just boost the nutrition of those plain old waffles and pancakes that your children like to have in the morning to eat. Another breakfast idea based on what we brought out of the garden, I cooked up some potatoes and put that on the bottom of my greased pan. We added some chopped chard that we had just harvested. We also added some chopped garlic scapes. And then I did a pretty liberal amount of salt and pepper. And we're just going to make, you guys know I love a good breakfast casserole. So that's what we're going to do. I have lots of duck eggs also needing to be used up. You saw in the beginning of the video the big pile that I had washed. So we're going to scramble those up, pour it on top, bake it on 350 for about 40 minutes, and we made a delicious, nutritious, 100% homegrown breakfast here. Everything in this meal was homegrown. The potatoes, the eggs, the chard, the garlic scapes, And it just really is a good feeling to feed your family something that you worked so hard to grow and harvest, and then to prepare it and watch them enjoy it, and know that it's nourishing them and providing them just everything they need to grow healthy and strong. It's a really good feeling, and that is why we homestead. That is why we grow the food. So it's that time of year to be harvesting herbs. I just wanted to let you know that early mornings are the best time to harvest your herbs. You want to harvest them before the sun comes up and begins to heat the plant. If you harvest them early, that will retain more of those natural oils, and your plants, your herbs, will have a better fragrance. It'll retain a lot more of that. So make sure you get up early and get those harvested. We, on this day, decided to do a big herb harvest. David here is using our herb stripper tool. I'll link it in the description to help get some rosemary off of the stalk. And we're just going to fill our freeze dryer trays with as many herbs as we can. It's just that time of year. We've got chamomile, we have a little bit of sage, and these are just smelling so amazing. In the back there, we have our rosemary. We have a full tray here of mint for tea. These are green onion tops that we're going to powder into green onion powder. And then we have lemon balm, as well as just some basil that I had from pruning some of my basil plants. And we're going to get all of these into the freeze dryer. It only takes about 10 hours to do a load of herbs like this. So it's a great little day project. We're going to get those going, and we will fill up some jars with some yummy herbs. Here we go. This is how everything looks. I do not powder up my herbs right when they come out of the freeze dryer. I find that they retain more of their flavor and scent if you wait to powder them before you use them. And that's about it for this week. I'm just really busy healing from kind of the trauma that I endured, and I will be back in next week's video with more information and videos for you. But I am going to focus on resting and healing in the meantime. I hope you all have a blessed week, and we will see you next Wednesday with another video.